my sister-in-law Tiffany slowly pushed me out of my own home, eventually changing the locks and treating me like an unwanted guest. When she finally demanded I leave so she could build a nursery, I didn't pack. I pulled out the deed and evicted them instead. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The flu had settled deep in my chest, a heavy, rattling weight that made every breath a labor. I had been in bed for 3 days, surviving on lukewarm tea and the sheer hope that the fever would break soon. My head was pounding, a rhythmic thudding behind my eyes that made the sunlight filtering through the curtains feel like a physical assault. I just wanted to sleep. I just wanted silence. But silence was a luxury I apparently no longer owned. The sound of drilling shattered the quiet. It wasn't a distant hum. It was a violent, grinding noise that vibrated through the floorboards of my bedroom. I groaned, pulling the duvet over my head, but the noise persisted, joined by the sound of heavy boots stomping down the hallway. I forced myself up. My body felt like lead, my joints aching as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I grabbed my robe, wrapping it tight around my shivering frame, and shuffled toward the door. I needed to ask William to keep it down. I needed to know why, in the middle of a Tuesday, it sounded like a construction crew had invaded the second floor. I opened my bedroom door and froze. My hallway, the hallway I had painted a soft, calming cream color just last year, was cluttered with boxes. But they weren't just any boxes, they were my boxes. I recognized the label on the side of one, Abigail's Art Supplies. Another was marked winter coats. They were stacked haphazardly against the wall, blocking the path to the bathroom. "William," I croaked, my voice rough from disuse. No answer, just the sound of laughter coming from the guest room down the hall. I pushed past the boxes, a spike of adrenaline cutting through the fever haze. The door to the guest room, the room William and his wife, Tiffany, had been staying in for the past 6 months, was wide open. But it wasn't the guest room anymore. They had painted over the vintage floral wallpaper. The beautiful, hand-pressed paper that my grandmother had installed 50 years ago was gone, covered in a stark, blindingly bright shade of beige. Tiffany was standing in the center of the room, directing William, who was drilling a hole into the wall to mount a massive, gilded mirror that looked completely out of place in my Victorian home. "A little to the left, Will." "No, your other left," Tiffany said, her voice sharp and commanding. She was holding a glass of wine, looking perfectly put together in a cashmere sweater, a stark contrast to my disheveled, feverish state. What is going on?" I managed to say, leaning against the doorframe for support. William jumped, the drill slipping and gouging a scratch into the fresh paint. He spun around, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Abby, I thought you were asleep." Tiffany didn't jump. She turned slowly, her expression shifting from annoyance at the interruption to a pitying, tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh good, you're up," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "We were trying to be quiet, but this wall is tougher than it looks. Old houses, right? Always a pain." I stared at the wall. "You painted over the wallpaper, Grandmom's wallpaper." "It was dated, Abigail," Tiffany said dismissively, waving her hand as if shooing away a fly. "It made the room look small. We're opening up the space. We need it to feel more like a master suite if we're going to be comfortable here long-term." "Master suite," I repeated, the words feeling thick in my mouth. "This is the guest room. My room is the master suite." Tiffany exchanged a look with William, a look that spoke volumes. It was a look of shared secrets, of a conversation I hadn't been part of. William looked down at his boots, unable to meet my gaze. "Well," Tiffany said, setting her wine glass down on a side table that I realized was also new. "Actually, we need to talk about that. Since we're going to be the ones starting a family soon, it really doesn't make sense for you to have the biggest room, does it? We need the space for the crib, the changing table, all the gear. We were going to ask you to switch rooms this weekend." She wasn't asking. The tone wasn't a request, it was a notification. "Switch rooms?" I felt a cough building in my chest, but I swallowed it down. "Tiffany, this is my house. You're staying here because you lost your apart." Meant this was supposed to be temporary. Tiffany laughed, a cold, tinkling sound. "Oh, Abigail, don't be dramatic, we're family. And honestly, William and I have been talking. You're single, you work from home, you don't need all this space. It's wasted on you. We're doing you a favor by updating things, really. You should be thanking us." She walked over to me, not to check on my fever, but to gently guide me out of the room. Her hand on my arm felt like a clamp. "Go back to bed," she said, her voice dropping to a patronizing coo. "You look terrible. We'll discuss the room swap when you're not so emotional. But just so you know, the movers are coming on Friday to shift your furniture to the attic room. It'll be cozy for you." She shut the door in my face. I stood there in the hallway, surrounded by my own displaced belongings, the sound of the drill starting up again behind the closed door. The betrayal hit me harder than the virus ever could. It wasn't just that they were changing my house. It was the absolute certainty in her voice that she had the right to do it. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I stumbled back to my bedroom, my legs shaking so violently I had to hold onto the wall. I collapsed onto my bed, but sleep was impossible now. The drilling continued, a physical reminder of the invasion happening a few feet away. My mind raced, replaying the scene. The attic room. She wanted to move me to the attic room. That room was essentially a finished storage space. It had a slanted ceiling that I would hit my head on, a single small window, and no insulation. It was freezing in the winter and an oven in the summer. It was a room for boxes, not people. And she had spoken about it with such finality. The movers are coming on Friday. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it. I had 3 missed calls from Oliver, my oldest friend, and, conveniently, a very sharp real estate attorney. I hadn't answered because I felt like death, but now, seeing his name on the screen felt like a lifeline. I didn't call him back immediately. I couldn't let him hear me like this, weak, sick, and terrified. Instead, I lay there and listened to the sounds of my house being colonized. Around 6:00 p.m., the drilling stopped. I heard the clatter of pots and pans from the kitchen downstairs. My stomach grumbled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since the previous day. I waited another 30 minutes, hoping to avoid them before venturing downstairs. The kitchen, usually my sanctuary, was a disaster zone. Every light was on. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink, my good china, I noted with a wince, and the smell of burnt garlic hung heavy in the air. Tiffany was sitting at the island, scrolling on her phone, while William scrubbed a pot. "Oh, look who's resurrected," Tiffany said without looking up. "There's some pasta left in the pot. You might want to heat it up, it's cold." "William," I said, ignoring her and looking directly at my brother. "We need to talk, about the room, about the wallpaper." William kept scrubbing, his shoulders hunched. "Abby, please, not now. Tiff is really stressed with her work projects and the baby planning. We just need things to be settled." Settled, I walked further into the room, clutching my robe. "You destroyed a historic part of this house without asking me, and you can't just move me into the attic. This is my home, William. I hold the deed. I pay the taxes." Tiffany finally looked up. Her eyes were narrow, calculating. "We contribute, Abigail. We buy groceries. We pay for the internet." "You buy the groceries you eat," I countered, my voice gaining a little strength. "And you pay for the upgraded internet because you said mine wasn't fast enough for your streaming. That is not rent." Tiffany stood up, sighing as if she were dealing with a petulant child. "This is exactly why we need to take charge. You're so transactional. Family isn't about deeds and taxes, Abigail. It's about need. We need the space. You don't. It's called equity. Just because grandmom left the house to you doesn't mean it's not morally William's home too. He grew up here. But she left it to me, I said firmly, because I took care of her for 5 years while you two were traveling Europe. Ancient history, Tiffany snapped. Look, we're not going to argue about this while you're spreading germs everywhere. The painters are coming for the hallway tomorrow. Try to stay out of their way. She grabbed a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge and marched out of the kitchen. William turned off the faucet. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. Abby, just let her have this. She's nesting. It's hormonal. Once the baby comes, she'll calm down. Please, for me. You're asking me to move into the attic, Will, I whispered. It's just temporary, he lied. We both knew it was a lie. Just until we get on our feet. He dried his hands on a toe. And followed his wife, leaving me alone in the messy kitchen. I looked at the pile of dirty dishes, my grandmother's wedding china, caked in dried tomato sauce. They hadn't even bothered to rinse them. I didn't eat the cold pasta. I made a cup of tea, my hands shaking not from fever, but from rage. They thought I was weak. They thought that because I was sick, because I was single, because I loved my brother, I would just roll over. They thought the family card was a trump card that overruled property law and basic decency. Tiffany had called me transactional. She had no idea. I took a sip of tea, the warmth spreading through my chest. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Friday. The movers were coming Friday. That gave me 3 days. I unlocked my phone and opened my text thread with Oliver. I didn't call. I typed a simple message. You were right about the prenup, and I think I'm going to need that file we prepared last year, the one labeled nuclear option. They thought they were taking over a helpless spinster's house, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was a medical illustrator. My entire career was built on understanding the precise, intricate structures of living things and exactly how to dismantle them. To understand why I didn't just throw them out that very night, you have to understand the history of the house, and my history with William. Our parents died when I was 22 and William was 20. It was a car accident, sudden and brutal. We were left with nothing but grief and each other. Grandmom took us in, but her health was already failing. For 5 years, I put my life on hold. I finished my master's degree online while changing her IVs, managing her medications, and maintaining this massive, creaky Victorian house that she loved more than anything. William, he couldn't handle the sickness. He couldn't handle the smell of decline, so he ran. He backpacked through Asia, he studied in London, he found himself in Bali. I didn't resent him for it, not really. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted one of us to escape the heaviness of our reality. When Grandmom passed, she left the house to me. It wasn't a slight against William, it was payment. It was her way of acknowledging the years I had sacrificed. William got a small cash inheritance, which he promptly invested in a tech startup that didn't exist 2 years later. I stayed. I built my career from the sunroom. I restored the crown molding by hand. I sanded the floors. This house wasn't just wood and brick to me, it was my skin, my bones. Then came Tiffany. William met her 3 years ago. She was a brand consultant and influencer manager, which seemed to involve a lot of brunch photos and very little actual consulting. She was beautiful, polished, and terrifyingly ambitious. From the moment I met her, I felt like a smudge on her otherwise perfect lens. "Oh, you draw organs?" she had asked when we first met, wrinkling her nose at my portfolio. "That's niche." When William lost his job at the accounting firm 6 months ago, right after they had leased a luxury condo they couldn't afford, I was the one who offered them a landing pad. "Just until you find something new," I had said. "The guest wing is private, you'll have your own space." It started small, Tiffany complaining about the draftiness, Tiffany suggesting I change the curtains in the living room because they were depressing. Then, I'd come home to find my furniture rearranged. "Feng shui," she'd claim, "it flows better." But the real trouble began 2 months ago when Tiffany announced she was pregnant. It wasn't a joyous announcement. It was a strategic deployment of a biological weapon. Suddenly, everything was about the baby's environment. My workspace was too loud when I was on Zoom calls with doctors. My cooking was too spicy for her morning sickness. The stairs were a safety hazard that needed to be carpeted, at my expense, of course. And now, the hostile takeover was fully underway. The morning after the drilling incident, my fever had broken, leaving me weak but clear-headed. I made my way downstairs to find Tiffany holding court in my dining room. She had 3 people with her, a man in coveralls and 2 women with clipboards. "And this wall needs to come down," Tiffany was saying, gesturing to the partition between the dining room and the kitchen. "We need an open concept. It's essential for keeping an eye on the little one." "Excuse me," I interrupted, stepping into the room. The contractor looked at me, then back at Tiffany. "Is this the owner?" "I'm the sister-in-law," Tiffany said quickly, flashing a dazzling smile. "She lives here too, but she's been very ill. Don't worry about her. William and I are handling the renovations." "I am the owner," I said, my voice cutting through the room. I walked over to the contractor. "And no walls are coming down. In fact, I didn't authorize any estimate. You can leave." The contractor looked uncomfortable. He started to pack up his measuring tape. "Sorry, lady, I don't want to get in the middle of a domestic dispute." "There is no dispute," Tiffany hissed as the workers shuffled out the front door. Once they were gone, she spun on me, her face contorted in a way that ruined her curated aesthetic. "You embarrassed me. Do you know how hard it is to get that contractor?" "You are trying to knock down walls in a house you do not own," I said, crossing my arms. "It's for the family, Abigail. Why are you so selfish?" Tiffany shouted. "You're a spinster living in a 5-bedroom mansion. It's obscene. William is your brother. This is his birthright too." "Grandmom gave it to me." "Because she was senile?" Tiffany screamed. "William told me everything. You manipulated her. You guilt-tripped her into signing it over while he was away trying to build a life. You stole this house from him." I stared at her, stunned. Is that what William had told her? To cover his own guilt for abandoning us, had he painted me as the villain? "And now," Tiffany continued, stepping closer, smelling of expensive perfume and entitlement, "we are just taking back what should have been his. You're lucky we let you stay here at all. Once the baby comes, things are going to change, Abigail. Realistically, you're not going to fit into our dynamic. You should probably start looking for a condo. Something smaller, more manageable for a single woman your age." She smiled then. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. "I'm doing this for you, really. You look tired." She patted my cheek, a condescending, light tap, and walked away, pulling her phone out to undoubtedly call another contractor. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. She thought that by invoking William and the baby, she had checkmated me. She didn't know about the file on my desk. She didn't know about the clause in the deed. And she certainly didn't know that Oliver was on his way over and he wasn't coming for a social call. The morning after Tiffany's declaration of war, the house was eerily quiet. William had left for his job search, which I suspected was actually him sitting in a coffee shop scrolling through Reddit to avoid his wife, and Tiffany was out sourcing materials. I took advantage of the silence. I didn't go to the attic. I went to my office. My office was the sunroom at the back of the house. It was a sanctuary of glass and light, filled with my anatomy charts, my expensive digital drawing tablets, and the smell of graphite and old paper. But as I stepped inside, I felt a violation deeper than the drilling upstairs. My desk had been moved. It was shoved into the corner, away from the best light. In its place, Tiffany had set up a ring light and a tripod facing the garden. A ring light, in my medical illustration studio. I walked over to my desk. My papers were in disarray. Sketches of a aortic valve replacement were buried under a stack of bridal magazines. I shoved the magazines aside, my hands trembling with a cold, precise anger. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was calculating. I pulled out my phone and dialed Oliver. "Talk to me," Oliver said, picking up on the first ring. He didn't say hello. He knew me too well. "They're moving me to the attic," I said, my voice steady. "And Tiffany thinks she owns the place. She told me yesterday that I stole the house from William." "She said what?" Oliver's voice dropped an octave. I could hear the click of his keyboard in the background. "Abby, please tell me you recorded that." "I didn't, but she's escalating. She's talking about knocking down walls. She's bringing in contractors without my permission." "Okay," Oliver said, the clicking stopping. "We need to move. Now, you have two options. Option A, we file a restraining order and an immediate eviction notice. It'll be messy, it'll be loud, and William will probably cry. And option B. Option B is the nuclear option we discussed last year," Oliver said. "We let them hang themselves. If she's talking about taking back the house, she's operating under a delusion of ownership. We need to find out why. Is it just entitlement, or is there something legal they're trying to pull? I can run a full asset search on both of them, see what their actual financial situation is. It might explain the desperation." I looked at the ring light, then at the garden my grandmother had planted. "Do the search. I want to know everything. Every debt, every credit card, every lie." "Done. I'll have it by tomorrow. In the meantime, Abby, secure your documents. If they really think they own the place, they might try to lose the deed." I hung up. Oliver was right. I went to the wall safe hidden behind a framed print of Vesalius's skeletal figures. I spun the dial, left, right, left. The heavy door clicked open. The deed was there. My grandmother's will was there. But as I thumbed through the papers, I realized something was missing. The property tax receipts from last year. I kept all my financial records in the safe. I knew I had put them there. I rifled through the folders again. Gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would they take tax receipts? Unless they were trying to prove residency. Or worse, trying to claim they had been paying the taxes to establish some kind of squatter's right or equity claim. I closed the safe and locked it. I needed to be smarter. I couldn't just react to their noise. I had to anticipate their silence. I spent the rest of the afternoon not working, but documenting. I took photos of every room. I took photos of the damage they had done, the scratches on the floor, the holes in the plaster, the ruined wallpaper. I took a photo of the ring light in my office. I created a digital folder named Evidence and uploaded everything to the cloud, password protected. Then I waited. When they came home that evening, they were laughing. I heard the front door open, followed by the clinking of shopping bags. "It's going to be perfect, babe," Tiffany was saying. "The nursery will be right next to our room, and once we get that wall down." "Tiffany," I said. I was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at them like a ghost. They both froze. Tiffany was holding several shopping bags from a high-end baby boutique. William was holding a bottle of champagne. "We need to discuss the contractors," I said calmly. "I called the company you brought in today. I told them that any work done on this property without the signature of the deed holder, me, would result in a lawsuit for property damage. They won't be coming back." The silence in the hallway was absolute. William looked at Tiffany, panic flaring in his eyes. Tiffany's face went rigid. She slowly set the bags down. "You did what?" she whispered. "I protected my asset," I said. "This is my house. No walls come down." Tiffany laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Your asset? You selfish, bitter little woman. You're trying to ruin our family because you're jealous. That's what this is, isn't it? You can't stand that William is happy. You can't stand that we're building a life while you just exist." "I'm not the one trying to renovate a house I don't pay for," I countered. "We will pay for it," Tiffany shouted, stepping forward. "Once William's trust comes through, we're going to buy you out. We were going to be nice about it, offer you a fair price, but now I'm going to make sure we get every penny's worth." "William's trust," I looked at my brother. "What trust, Will?" William turned pale. "Tiff, don't." "The trust your grandmother left him," Tiffany yelled. "The one you've been hiding. He told me, Abigail. He told me she left money for him that you're controlling." I stared at them. The air left the room. There was no trust. Grandmom had left William $10,000, which he had spent years ago. There was no secret fund. There was no buyout money coming. William had lied to her. He had built their entire financial future, their entire claim to this house, on a lie about a non-existent trust fund to keep her from leaving him. "Oh, William," I said softy, "what have you done?" The realization that my brother was conning his own wife and using me as the villain to do it changed the texture of my anger. It wasn't just annoyance anymore, it was disgust. But it also gave me leverage. The next day, the atmosphere in the house was toxic. Tiffany wouldn't look at me. She stormed around the kitchen, slamming cabinet doors and muttering about legal action and lawyers. William was a ghost, avoiding both of us, hiding in the guest room-turned-master suite. I decided to leave the house for a few hours. I needed to clear my head and pick up a prescription for the lingering cough that still rattled my chest. I was gone for maybe 2 hours. When I pulled my car into the driveway, I noticed something odd. The front door, usually painted a deep, welcoming navy blue, looked different. I grabbed my purse and walked up the steps. The paint was the same, but the hardware was new. The brass handle, worn smooth by 3 generations of my family's hands, was gone. In its place was a sleek, matte black smart lock with a keypad. I stared at it, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I reached into my bag and pulled out my key ring. I tried to insert my key into the backup cylinder. It didn't fit. They had changed the locks. I stood on my own porch, the wind biting through my coat, locked out of the home I owned. The audacity was so staggering I almost couldn't process it. It wasn't just a power move, it was an illegal eviction. I pressed the doorbell. I could hear it chime inside. No answer. I pressed it again, holding it down. Finally, the door opened a crack. Tiffany stood there, the chain lock engaged. She looked at me through the gap, her face a mask of faux innocence. "Oh, you're back," she said. "Aid." "Open the door, Tiffany," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "We can't just let anyone in," she said breezily. "William and I decided to upgrade the security. Given how unstable you've been lately, shouting at contractors, threatening us, we didn't feel safe, so we installed a smart lock. I live here, I own this house. Open the door." "You can come in," she said, "if you agree to behave, and we need to talk about the attic. If you want the code to the door, you need to agree to move your things upstairs by the weekend. It's a fair trade. Security for cooperation." I looked at her. She was ransoming access to my own home. "Tiffany," I said, leaning in close to the crack, "if you don't open this door in 5 seconds, I'm not calling the police. I'm calling a locksmith to drill this door off its hinges, and then I'm calling the movers to put your things on the lawn." She hesitated. She saw something in my eyes. Maybe the fever had burned away my usual patience, and she unhooked the chain. "You're so dramatic," she muttered, opening the door. "It's just a lock. William has the code for you." I pushed past her, the heat of the hallway hitting my cold face. "Where is he?" "He's in the study," she said, closing the door behind me, "working on the guest list." "Guest list," I stopped. "For the housewarming," Tiffany said, walking past me toward the kitchen as if she hadn't just committed a crime. "Saturday night. We're inviting a few friends, some of my clients. It's a networking thing, a new beginnings party." She turned to face me, leaning against the wall where she had hung a hideous abstract painting over my grandmother's vintage mirror. "And actually, Abigail, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. It's going to be a very specific crowd, high net worth, influencers, people who matter." She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my comfortable, paint-stained cardigan and my sensible shoes. "It would be better if you weren't here," she said. "Excuse me." "Just for the evening," she threw her hands up. "God, don't look so offended. It's just, you don't fit the vibe. It's going to be awkward if you're lurking around coughing and talking about. What was it? Heart valves? It's a buzzkill. We figured you could go stay at a hotel for the night. Treat yourself on us." On you, I laughed. With what money, Tiffany? Her eyes narrowed. With William's money from the trust. There is no trust, I shouted, finally snapping. William lied to you. There is no money. The only thing keeping a roof over your head is my generosity, which is rapidly running out. Tiffany's face went red. You're a liar. He showed me the statements. He showed me the bank app. He showed you a Photoshop file, I yelled back. Wake up, you are living in a fantasy. I am living in my house, she screamed, her voice cracking. And you are just the jealous sister trying to sabotage us. You know what? I'm done asking. You will be out for the party. And you will move to the attic. Or, I swear to God, Abigail, I will make your life here so miserable you'll beg to leave. She turned and stomped into the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, shaking. My hand gripped the banister. She was going to throw a party. A new beginnings party in my house to celebrate her ownership. I looked at the smart lock on the door. Okay, let her have the party. Let her invite the people who matter. Let her build the stage. I pulled out my phone and texted Oliver. Saturday night, bring the papers and bring the notary. The next 2 days were a blur of Cold War tactics. Tiffany refused to speak to me. She moved through the house like a whirlwind, cleaning, rearranging, and accepting deliveries of catering supplies and rental furniture. She treated me not like a roommate, but like a stain on the carpet she was trying to scrub out. William was even worse. He was entirely absent, leaving the house before I woke up and returning long after I had retreated to my room. He was avoiding the inevitable collision between his lies and reality. But while they were planning a party, I was building a case. On Thursday morning, Oliver sent me the file. I opened it on my secure laptop in the library, my heart pounding. It was worse than I thought. William wasn't just broke, he was drowning. He had maxed out 3 credit cards in the last 6 months, cards I didn't even know he had. But the real shock was Tiffany. Tiffany's brand consulting business had been dissolved by the state 4 years ago for failure to pay taxes. She had 3 outstanding judgments against her from previous landlords for unpaid rent. And, most damning of all, there was a pending lawsuit from a woman in Connecticut who claimed Tiffany had borrowed $15,000 for a business investment that never materialized. They were grifters. My brother had become a grifter to keep up with her, and she was a grifter by nature. But the smoking gun, the piece of pap, that made my blood run cold, was a document Oliver had found filed with a predatory lending company online. It was a loan application for $50,000. Under collateral, William had listed 142 Maple Avenue, my house. And under owner, he had listed William and Tiffany Miller. He had forged my signature. It was a sloppy forgery, a digital copy-paste of my signature from an old birthday card I had given him, but it was there. They were trying to take out a high-interest loan against my property to fund their lifestyle, or maybe just to pay for this party. I sat back in my chair, the nausea rising in my throat. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was fraud. This was a felony. I heard the front door open. It was Friday afternoon. The movers Tiffany had threatened me with were supposed to arrive soon. I walked out to the hallway. Tiffany was there, directing 2 burly men who looked less like professional movers and more like guys she had found on Craigslist. Just grab the desk first, she was saying, pointing toward my office. And the bookshelves, everything goes to the attic. Stop, I said. The men looked at me. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Ignore her, I'm paying you, she snapped. If you touch a single item in that room, I said to the men, holding up my phone, I will call the police and report a burglary in progress. I am the homeowner. This woman has no authority here. The men hesitated. One of them put down the box he was holding. Look, lady, we don't want no trouble. Is this your house or hers? It's ours, Tiffany shrieked. William, get down here. William appeared at the top of the stairs, looking haggard. He saw me, he saw the men, and he saw the phone in my hand. Tell them, William, Tiffany demanded. Tell them to move her stuff. William looked at me. I looked back, my expression stone cold. I wasn't the sister who covered for him anymore. I was the witness to his crime. "Will," I said softly, "I saw the loan application." His face went gray. All the color drained out of him in a second. He gripped the banister, swaying slightly. "What loan?" Tiffany asked, looking between us. "What is she talking about?" William swallowed hard. "Send them away, Tiff." "What's no? We have the party tomorrow. We need the room." "Send them away," William roared, his voice cracking. It was the first time I had ever heard him yell at her. Tiffany recoiled, shocked. She waved her hand at the men. "Fine, go, just go." The men didn't wait to be told twice. They hurried out the door. When the door clicked shut, the silence was deafening. "What loan?" Tiffany asked again, her voice lower, laced with suspicion. "Nothing," William muttered, refusing to look at me. "Just paperwork." "It's not nothing," I said, "but we'll talk about it later, tomorrow night, at the party." "You're not coming to the party?" Tiffany spat, regaining her composure. "I told you, you're not welcome." "Oh, I'll be there," I said. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. I think your people who matter will find what I have to say very interesting." I turned and walked into my office, closing the door and locking it. I spent the rest of the night printing. I printed the deed. I printed the dissolved business records. I printed the judgments. And I printed the fraudulent loan application with the forged signature. I organized them into neat little packets, one for William, one for Tiffany, and one for the guests to see if necessary. They wanted a show. They wanted to present themselves as the successful, wealthy owners of a historic Victorian estate. I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. The night of the party, I dressed not for a celebration, but for a funeral. I chose a sleek black dress, simple, elegant, and commanding. It was the kind of dress you wear when you need to be the strongest person in the room. I didn't hide in the attic. I stayed in my locked office until the clock struck 8:00 p.m. From behind my door, I could hear the transformation of my home. The silence I cherished had been replaced by the murmur of voices, the clinking of expensive crystal, and the soft thrum of jazz music. Tiffany had spared no expense, my expense, likely on the catering. I could smell truffle oil and roasted lamb wafting under the door. At 8:15, the noise level rose. It was speech time. I unlocked my door. I walked down the hallway, the plush runner muffling my footsteps. I reached the landing of the grand staircase, the spot where my grandmother used to stand to greet her guests. Below me, the living room and foyer were packed. There were maybe 40 people, a mix of Tiffany's influencer, friends in rented designer clothes, and a few of William's old colleagues who looked uncomfortable. Tiffany was standing by the fireplace, holding a flute of champagne. She looked radiant, I had to give her that. She was wearing a shimmering gold gown that shouted hostess. William stood beside her, looking like he was about to vomit. He was pale, sweating, and gripping his glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Tiffany called out, her voice chiming over the crowd. The music lowered. The room went quiet. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, beaming. "This house, it's been a dream of ours for a long time. When William and I first saw it, we knew it needed work. It needed love. It needed a vision. And tonight, I think you can all see what we've built. This isn't just a house, it's our legacy. A place for our children to grow up." A murmur of appreciation went through the crowd. Someone shouted, "It's beautiful, Tiff." "It hasn't been easy," she continued, putting a hand on her baby bump. "We've had to make sacrifices. We've had to deal with complications." She paused for dramatic effect, casting a quick, meaningful glance toward the ceiling, implying the burden of dealing with me. But we persevered, because family is everything. And tonight, we are so proud to welcome you to the Miller estate. The Miller estate, she had renamed my grandmother's house. I took a step down, then another. "And I want to make a special announcement," Tiffany said, her eyes gleaming. "As of this week, we have officially secured the financing to begin the final phase of renovations. The nursery wing is happening." William flinched. He looked down at his shoes. Actually, I said, my voice projecting clearly from the stairs, that's not quite true. The room froze. 40 heads turned upward. Tiffany's smile faltered, then hardened into a rictus of fury. Abigail, she hissed, I told you. You told me a lot of things, I said, descending the stairs slowly, my hand gliding down the mahogany banister. You told me you were grateful. You told me it was temporary. And tonight, you told these people this is your house. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a path between me and the fireplace. This is my sister-in-law, everyone, Tiffany said loudly, a nervous laugh bubbling up. She's not well, she's been very sick. Abigail, let's get you upstairs. She moved toward me, her hand outstretched to grab my arm. Don't touch me, I said. I didn't shout, I didn't have to. The authority in my voice stopped her cold. I turned to the guests. My name is Abigail Miller. I am the sole owner of this property. The deed is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. The taxes are paid by me. She's delirious, Tiffany shrieked, looking frantically at William. Will, tell them about the trust. William didn't move. He was shaking. There is no trust, is there, William? I asked, looking directly at my brother. The silence stretched, agonizing and heavy. No, William whispered. What? Tiffany spun on him. What did you say? There is no trust, William yelled, the dam finally breaking, tears streaming down his face. I spent the inheritance years ago. I lied. I lied because you wouldn't marry me if you knew I was broke. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Phones were out now. People were recording. Tiffany looked like she had been slapped. She stumbled back, clutching her stomach. You broke. But that's not the worst part, I said, drawing the attention back to me. I reached into my small clutch and pulled out the folded papers. The worst part is the fraud. I held up the loan application. This, I said, is an application for a $50,000 loan against my house. It lists William and Tiffany Miller as the owners. It has a signature at the bottom that looks like mine, but isn't. I walked over to the table where the expensive hors d'oeuvres were displayed and set the paper down next to the brie. That is a felony, I said, looking at Tiffany. It's called mortgage fraud, and since you signed it too, Tiffany, you're an accessory. Tiffany's face went white. She looked at the paper, then at me, then at the guests who were now backing away, whispering furiously. I didn't know, she stammered. I thought, he told me. You knew the deed wasn't in your name, I said. You knew you didn't pay the taxes. You knew I lived here. You just didn't care. You thought if you bullied me enough, if you moved my things and changed my locks, I would just fade away. You thought you could squat in a mansion and call it a legacy. The front door opened. A gust of cold air swept through the room. Oliver walked in. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing his court suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked straight to me, ignoring the stunned guests. Good evening, Oliver said, his voice booming. I am Abigail's attorney. I have here a formal notice of eviction for William and Tiffany Miller. He handed a thick envelope to William, who took it with trembling hands. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, Oliver stated professionally, given the evidence of fraud and the unauthorized alterations to the property. We will be filing a police report in the morning regarding the forgery. However, Ms. Miller has graciously agreed to withhold filing criminal charges if you are off the property by noon tomorrow and sign a confession admitting to the attempted fraud. Tiffany looked around the room. Her friends were leaving. The people who matter were scurrying out the door, abandoning their wine glasses on the antique tables, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. This isn't fair, Tiffany whispered, tears of rage spilling over. I'm pregnant. You can't do this to a pregnant woman. You did it to yourself, I said softly. You wanted a house so badly you stole it. Now you have nothing. I turned to the few remaining guests. The party is over, I said. Please leave my home. The exodus was swift. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty of strangers. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Tiffany sobbing in the guest room upstairs. I sat in the kitchen, the adrenaline finally leaving my system, leaving me exhausted. Oliver sat across from me, a comforting presence. "You did good, Abby," he said quietly. "I don't feel good," I admitted, looking at my hands. "I feel hollow." "That's normal. You just cut off a limb to save the body. It hurts, but you'll survive." William came down an hour later. He had a duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "She's packing," he said, his voice a rasp. "Her parents are coming to get her. She says she's filing for divorce." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. "I'm sorry, Abby," he said, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I wanted to be the guy she wanted. I wanted to be successful. And when the lie started, I couldn't stop it. It just got bigger and bigger. "You tried to steal my house, Will," I said. "You forged my signature." "I know," he wept. "I know. I was going to pay it back. I swear. I just needed the cash to keep her happy for a few more months until I found a job." "You need help," I said. "Serious help, and you're not going to find it here." He nodded. "I'm going to stay at a motel tonight. Then, I don't know, maybe go upstate, work construction with cousin Mike, get my head straight." "That sounds like a good plan." He hesitated at the door. "Do you hate me?" I looked at him. My little brother, the boy I had protected from bullies, the boy I had grieved with. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't trust you, and I don't know if I ever will again." He lowered his head and walked out into the night. The next morning, by noon, they were gone. The house was a wreck. There were holes in the walls, half-finished paint jobs, and the smell of stale champagne. But it was my wreck. I spent the next month reclaiming my life. I hired a professional crew, with Oliver's vetting, to repair the damage. I had the guest rooms stripped of its beige paint and repapered in a vintage floral print that looked just like grandmom's. I moved my desk back to the center of the sunroom. I didn't press charges. I had the signed confession, notarized by Oliver, tucked away in my safe. It was my insurance policy. If Tiffany ever tried to come back, if she ever tried to claim common law marriage or tenant rights, I had the proof that would send her to prison. She sent me a few nasty texts, blaming me for her divorce, for the stress on the baby. I blocked her number. I heard from a friend that she moved back in with her parents and was spinning a story on social media about being blindsided by a toxic family. Let her talk. I had the deed. William called me 3 months later. He was working hard, sober, and living in a small apartment. We talked for 5 minutes. It was awkward, stilted, and painful, but it was a start. One evening, 6 months after the party, I sat in my sunroom. The light was perfect, golden hour, filtering through the trees. I was working on a complex illustration of the human heart, detailing the chambers, the valves, the delicate machinery that keeps us alive. It struck me then how resilient the heart is. It can be stressed, it can be scarred, it can be forced to work under immense pressure. But as long as the structure holds, as long as the foundation is strong, it keeps beating. I looked around my quiet, beautiful home. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I picked up my stylus and went back to work.